Hey guys, it's Kate and I hope you're having a great day. I wanted to continue my watercolor techniques tutorial series with different kinds of scratching techniques. So that could be scoring, sgraffito, scratching. Sgraffito basically means scratching back a layer to reveal what's underneath. And it's used in many different things, but you can also use it in watercolor to add highlights on dry paint. But first I'm going to start with some of the textures that you can get with wet paint too, and that would be more scratching, especially using things like a palette knife, possibly credit cards, a stylus, anything with a hard edge. And I just wanted to show you a couple of different ways you can play with this with your artwork and maybe incorporate it into some of the things that you want to paint. So first I'm going to do a couple of different things with the palette knife, and I'm also going to be doing some glazing. So just to keep it simple, I'm going to go into my sap green, and this is going to be just a single color. Now, of course, you can paint with your palette knife, you can add second colors, but for the purposes of this video, I'm just going to keep it to a single color except for when I add my glaze. So I'm just going to add kind of a light wash of that sap green. Just go easy on the paper. I'm working on 100% cotton hot press paper, which has a smooth surface, but this will work just as well on cold press or if you are using cellulose paper. So I've got my wet paint on the page, and first I'm going to start with this palette knife that I have that has these grooves at the end, and you can make kind of a nice uniform line mark with this. And what happens when you do this is that the paint that's on the page that's wet, it will seek the lowest level of the paper, just like water flows downward because of gravity. So it will collect in those grooves left behind by the palette knife. Now you can do it with the straight edge of the palette knife too. I'm going to come in here and make some lines, just some simple lines with the edge of my knife. And then I can also use the tip and maybe put in just some sort of scribbly marks here. Almost like I've got some foliage or something. And as these all dry, that paint will continue to collect and darken. So even though I'm only painting with one color here, you can see there's already some variation even though it's still wet. And I'll let you see a bit of a close-up here. Okay. So one of my favorite tools for scoring is the stylus. And I really like this because you can get really detailed and precise because it's almost like a tool that you can write with. So I'm going to just do another quick wash, get some more of that sap green on here. And just add some color. All right. Now with the stylus, you can have kind of a thicker end and a thinner end. I'm going to use the thinner end of mine for a more pointy tip, and I can write text in it. I just wrote hello. I can make, I can scribble however I want. I can make little grids. I can do straight lines. All of those things I can do with a stylus. So this is a really great tool to have. And actually, I use this in many of my videos to scratch through wet paint. I use it with acrylic. I use it for all sorts of things. And I got this for $1.25 at the Dollar Tree. I've had it for like 2 years and it works great. Now, you don't only have to use those kinds of tools. So one thing that I have been using a lot lately is my little spray bottle lid for stamping. And I've got this little 2-ounce spray bottle that I use for watercolor, and it comes with this little tiny lid. And so really anything with a hard edge you can use for this. So I could go in with my lid and just press with it and leave that groove in the paper. And it's going to have the same kind of effect. So while we're waiting on those to dry, I'm going to show you the Xacto knife. And so one thing with this method, with the Sgraffito and using the Xacto knife on dry paint, which I would not recommend using it on wet paint because your paper is soft when it's wet and you could really damage your paper and make it peel and all sorts of things. On dry paint, you can use it, especially if you want to make some precise highlights in your artwork. The only thing that I would say is if you're going to use this method, because it is destructive, you are probably going to want to save it to the very end, and I would not paint over it afterward. You're essentially scraping away part of the paper surface. It's not going to be quite as nice to paint on anymore, and you may get some pilling, especially if you are using cellulose watercolor paper. So this would be a good example to use. This would be if you wanted to create some sparkle on a water surface. And so I'm going to zoom in some. Okay, that's about as far in as I can get. Now, there's a couple different things you can do. So you can kind of make some random marks just by scraping into it very lightly with either an Xacto knife or some type of blade. You can use a box cutter or a sharp knife. And I'm just kind of running it sideways across the paper. I'm not cutting into it. I'm really just dragging my blade. And you can see that very slowly, because you want to do it lightly and just be careful, very slowly some of that paint comes off the surface. And it's kind of a nails on the chalkboard sound. Okay. And the more you do it, the more you'll uncover. Like you can see here, I'm getting quite a bit off of that surface, and you can see it is destructive. You can see a little bit of paper fuzz on the edge of my knife there. So that's one way you can use the Xacto knife or a box cutter or something like that, some kind of blade. Another thing you can do is kind of score your paper with it very lightly, and it will almost create a little shape that you can scrape off. So let's say, for instance, that I wanted to make a little tiny triangle mark in here that would be white. So what I can do is just very lightly score the paper and make my triangle shape, and then start to scrape that back a little bit. And you can see where I scrape will follow my cut line, and I can get more precise that way. And I can get a pretty clean triangle there, just like that. And I'm going to show this as a close-up just so you can see that difference there. Hopefully you can see it in the screen. So this is destructive, but if it's on your finished paper, it's going to be okay. I just wouldn't paint over it and get it wet again. We're all dry and I'm back, and I'm actually going to dip into my lemon yellow. And I just wanted to show you that you can go over with another layer of paint. So glazing is layering transparent layers, and it can be a lighter color, a darker color, the same color, but I'm going to try a lighter color. And one of the neat things is that dark line will still maintain its darkness more than the outside. Now, even when you glaze, if you have existing marks in the paint, your glaze will still kind of sink down into that lower level, but it will really do a nice job of maintaining that darkness that you have there. And I'm going to go over this second area. And you can see how this really changes things up a bit I'm going to blot and kind of go over this again, just so it's not too watery. And you can see those stripes really maintaining their darkness. Let me do another one here. And you can see the really neat things that can happen depending on how you're doing your glazing. And I'm just going to use that lemon yellow up here and also over these round stamp marks. And take the last of my Viridian and come right in here. And I can even make some marks, and that will kind of go around my circle too. So we'll see how that dries. All right, I'm back and we are dry. So I'm going to give you the close-up, and you can see where we glazed and painted again and how those marks end up looking. And right here, this little strip, you can see the original palette knife marks and how they look with that first coat of paint. And here is where we did some more. You can see where I went over the circles and my Stylus marks with both glaze layers and how the color sinks in, whether you're working lighter or darker. And then last but not least, these are our scraping marks with the blade into the paper to make highlights. So I hope this video really helped you today. And if it gave you some ideas on how you can do a project in the future, or how you might incorporate this technique into your watercolor paintings, maybe it'll give you some ideas and see what kind of outcomes you can have. But if you like this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. And if you want to see more like this, make sure to subscribe to my channel. And until next time, keep creating.